Subject is art in space, a very important topic for those of you who followed it. And today we have four excellent proponents of those arts in various forms. Chris Calle of Connecticut, Ron Woods of the Space Coast, Doug Forrest of Los Angeles, California, and also Tom Usciak, who's here with us.
Doug Forrest.
We got last year's.
Okay.
Doug's still in California.
That's last year's engagement, Cal.
Okay.
All right,
Doug out and we got, sorry.
And we have Tim Gagnon, Space Coast.
Well, let's go with what we have right here. Let's start off with Chris Calle. He has worked on subjects ranging from Apollo to the distant planets. Chris is an artist whose space art can be seen on as small as a 1-inch United States postage stamp or as large as a 10 by 20 foot mural. Calle has designed more than 35 postage stamps for the United States Postal Service, including 2 stamps commemorating the 25th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing, designed jointly with his father, the late Paul Calle. Tim Gagnon was born in East Hartford, Connecticut, and became enthralled in the space programs, so much so that his father brought him at age 16 to the night launch of Apollo 17 in December of 1972. That started a passion for putting his artistic vision onto canvas and symbolic patches that continues today. In the 1990s, Gagnon was an artist for the Astronaut Memorial Foundation and found a niche in historic murals and commemorative paintings. At last count, Tim has 19 patches currently affixed somewhere on board the International Space Station. Ron Woods is a space worker with a unique story that led to his passion for painting space suits and hardware in watercolor, oils, and acrylics. He was one of the suit techs who put the Apollo 11 crew into their spacesuits before their historic launch. He did the same for the Apollo 8 and 15 crews, as well as 3 Skylab crews and the crew for Apollo Soyuz. Woods' training started in 1967 at the Houston, Texas Manned Spacecraft Center, as it was known then, and he actually wore Apollo spacesuits to evaluate them for the manufacturer. And space photojournalist Tom Usciak brings a different medium, but the same artistic perspective to the ShuttleFest III art panel. Tom has carried a camera around Kennedy Space Center since Apollo 15 in July of 1971. He operated a successful photography print lab for decades, allowing him to follow his passion to cover 4 launches of the Skylab and ASTP missions. He has 67 space shuttle missions viewed through his camera lens, spanning from film to the digital age. Tom started with his college newspaper and worked his way up to being a featured photographer in magazines such as Space World and Astro, Final Frontier, and Aviation Space. And with that, I would like to introduce today our panel for our art segment. Gentlemen, take it away.
Chris, I got the slides racked up with you first, Tim,
okay.
Ron, and then Tom, just like we have up there.
Okay.
Comment on your slides and then you can do your thing.
Okay, sure. So tell a little bit of story about each one. So we've heard today, and we hear a lot about the space workers, the people behind the scenes, the astronauts, the people who create that incredible technology, behind space exploration. And today we're talking about the 4 of us. We document it. It's a different approach. It adds the A in STEM to make STEAM, and I think it's a really important component of that, because without documenting it, you wouldn't really know what was happening. So we're just going to go through some slides, tell a few stories. I guess we're starting with mine. This is actually a piece. I was going to talk about what's on tap for us. This is something that I'm working on right now. I had done this painting of Gene Cernan, walking on the moon, Last Man on the Moon. It's called Last Man. It was an oil painting I did, and I'm going to make a poster of this utilizing each of the Apollo patches. Just kind of it's the end of Apollo. That's what I'll call it, that poster. So that's what that piece is. Let's go to the next one. Pretty much the same. It's a little out of order. Remember this slide, and my last slide I'll talk about. The same thing in the middle, but the 4 covers on the outsides are original hand drawings on a first day cover, and that first day cover is for the 25th anniversary of the moon landing stamp that my father, Paul Calle, and I designed together. And we jointly did these little hand drawings on the covers. And just like with the, we'll go back to that. Oh, no, I'll talk about it later. Well, yeah, just, people always asked us, we designed that stamp jointly together. It's one painting done by two artists, and everybody would always ask us, who did what? Which part did you do? Which part did your dad do? And our set answer was, my dad would say, Chris did the best parts, and I would say, my dad did the best parts. So those are the stamps. I'll get back to that at the end. For the next one. So I was going to throw out to the panel. I was going to ask, what's one of the most memorable experiences you've had, either with the artwork you've created or with the memories you've experienced, either with astronauts or with workers or just an experience. And this to me was one of the most memorable ones. Gene Cernan was loved by so many people. He was a fixture at Space Fest, which was a gathering similar to this out in Arizona, put out by Nova Space Galleries. And I had done this painting of Gene. I think this might have been the last year before he passed away. It might have been the last Space Fest he attended. I had done this original painting, and I had exhibited my father's prints, and I had exhibited my prints, and some little original drawings at Space Fest before, but I had never had an original painting. And so I brought this there. It's of Gene Cernan, on the moon, holding the flag, very patriotic piece. And the opening night, they had a reception and a couple collectors. There were 3 collectors who really wanted it, and they were joking that they were going to have to get in a bidding war. And we had a lot of fun with that. But then Gene saw it. Gene loved it. And he walked over, and we started talking about the painting, and I told him how I painted it, and what I did. And he pointed at that earth, and he said, Chris, you painted this exactly as I remembered it. And for an artist, I'm sure, Tim, I'm sure you've had compliments, about your patches from the astronauts who've flown, something significant about what you put on the patch. And for me, that's the ultimate, compliment coming from Gene. That's how he remembered it. And he took this, somebody took this photograph, kind of surreptitiously, and he's pointing up there, and that's what he's saying in that image. But the story goes beyond that. So that was night 1. So this is a Thursday night to Sunday afternoon event. Starting Friday morning, Gene at that point had a cane because he hurt his leg. So every time I walked past his booth, he'd say, Calle. And I'd come over and he'd take his cane and whack me on my leg. What's that for? He'd say, get out of here. And then so he kept hitting me every time he saw me. And I said, what are you doing? He said, you owe me royalties for that painting. Because you painted me. And I was like, yeah. So, and sure enough, I'd walk again, he'd whack me. So this, 2 days. So Friday into Saturday afternoon. So by Saturday afternoon, I said, Gene, I want to show you something on the painting. And he's like, okay. So he gets up and he walks over there, and I said, you see this painting? You love the painting, right? He said, I love the painting. I said, and he said, yeah, you owe me royalties. So then I said, see that visor? See, I painted that visor and painted it. It's beautiful, recreation of how the visor looks, the reflections. He says, yeah, I love that, the reflection and everything. And I said, I know you think I still owe you royalties. And he said, and I said, but before I painted that visor, I did a portrait of Buzz Aldrin. And then I painted over with the visor. So I don't owe you royalties at all because that's not even you. So I have a million great stories, but that's one of my favorite ones about Gene Cernan. And I waited 2 days, to lay that. I waited 2 days to figure out something how to get back. I mean, all those gotchas that Wally Sharon, all those guys did. That was my gotcha on, and he knew it. For the rest of the time, he just was resigned to the fact that that was it. So, next one. This is a series that I started 2 years ago. I did this painting on the left. It's called Touched by the Moon, and it's Earthrise. Earthrise from Apollo 8. And it's an oil painting, and if you see one of the prints I have in the other room, there's so much texture on the lunar surface, and really thick paint. For me, I was an illustrator for 20 some odd years, and with illustration, you get an assignment and you need to turn it around fairly quickly, and so you can't paint in oil paint because it takes too long to dry. And so, and the thicker your paint is, the longer it'll take to dry. And I wasn't comfortable with acrylics at that time, so I had created this technique where it was kind of like colored pencil and ink washes, and it was a fairly quick technique. But now that I'm painting fine art, you know, for kind of myself, for collectors, for commissions, I love oil paint because I just love that tactile feeling of really thick paint. And if you look at one of the prints, you'll see it's just thick paint. I was given some of the sawdust from one of Stu Roos's moon trees that he brought seeds up on Apollo 14, came back, they planted these trees that they called moon trees, and they planted them, I think, all over the world, you know, all over the United States. And one of them at KSC, I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, had fallen in a storm, and a friend of mine, Scott Phillips, who does these beautiful wooden sculptures of space shuttles, he got permission to cut it up, and to use in some of his sculptures, and by virtue of the fact that he cut it up, this sawdust was created, and he figured you can't just let that dust, you know, the wind take that, so he put it all in a plastic bag and saving it for something. And then when I was working on a painting of, I'll show you later, when I was working on this painting, I added something into the paint, and he had heard about that, and he called me and he said, hey, you know, would you like to use this sawdust? Can you think of anything to use it? And I had met Rosemary Rusin not too long before that, and I said, sure, I had this idea, let me do a painting and add the moon tree sawdust into it. So I did this painting and I added the moon tree sawdust in the paint as I did it. And so that added to that thickness. So I love the painting. Painting worked out great. It's got kind of like this bluish purple haze around the earth, black, you know, darkness, starkness. Very well received. And then I started thinking, hey, you know, there's that blackness, but my wife said, hey, why don't you put some stars? Why don't you put stars? And I said, I like the starkness. But then it started me thinking, I can now take a digital image of my painting and I can add different backgrounds to it. So I did this background of Starry Night, Van Gogh's Starry Night. It seemed to work. It was really interesting. So I've done this whole series of up to about a dozen different ones, different backgrounds. Some are, you know, the stars. Some are nebulas. Gustav Klimt, if you know that artist, he did this painting called The Kiss, and I added that in the background of one. So it's kind of limitless what I can put in the background. So it's kind of a series I'm working on. It's an open-ended series. I don't know. I'll probably end up doing hundreds of these, just if for no other reason, just for myself. So you go to the next slide. This goes back to that original Last Man painting I showed you. I just wanted to show a little bit of the process. On the left is the sketch that I did, based on famous photo of Gene Cernan on the moon, and then that is the actual painting on my easel. And you can see I added a lot of like footprints and things that you don't see maybe in the original painting, because I just realized that, you know, they were walking around a lot more than you even think about. And you'll see in the original there's where they would walk around the flag, you know, planting the flag. You don't really see that in photographs, but you know that they were walking around and planting it. So I added my own. I think that's important when you're working on kind of historical pieces, and if you're using reference material, photographic records or other paintings or something, to incorporate what you see, but make it your own. Because if all you're doing is, you know, duplicating the photograph, you know, then why are you doing that? Same way I think Ron with like a watercolor. You know, you're using reference, a photographic reference, but as soon as you put that beautiful watercolor, it'll never look like a photograph because it's that medium. So I just wanted to show you kind of the before and the after on that one. So that's my father, Paul Calle. Some of you may know, I'll just give the brief. My father was, when at the end of Mercury, NASA decided to start this fine art program where they would send artists to the Cape to document manned spaceflight. And it was to document not just the astronauts, but the rockets and the engineers, and they were given complete free rein. I got a million stories that are crazy stories about the early Wild West days down there, you know, where they had access to everything because they didn't put the astronauts in a category. They didn't know what to do with them, so basically they did whatever they want. And if somebody told them you can't do that, they'd say okay, but they would do it first. You know, what is that? Ask permission. Yeah, ask forgiveness later. So my dad was one of the original 8 artists that came down covering Gordon Cooper's mission, and then he continued with every mission of Gemini and Apollo after that. And I think the most significant part was when my dad was the only artist in the suiting up in the breakfast room during Apollo 11. He was the only artist sketching him during that process. But this sort of shows a little progression of me and my father. So in the left is me holding Gordon Cooper's gloves, the actual gloves that he wore on his mission. And my father, so the artist came down for that mission, and after the mission, it was the end of Mercury, and my father had this idea to create a painting. It was a big painting. It's like 4 feet by 6 feet or something. And he had this idea almost like to create a still life of Gordon Cooper's suit, his gloves, his helmet, almost like a still life, like somebody would paint, bottle and apples and something. And so he called Jim Dean, who was the art director and in charge of this new fine art program, and said, hey, I got this great idea for this painting. Told him what the painting he was thinking about, and hey, do you think NASA, could send me the helmet and the gloves and the spacesuit? And Jim said, oh, let me check. And sure enough, a few weeks later, this box comes from whether UPS or whatever it was, just a box. They folded it up. No bubble wrap, no crate, no styrofoam. They put the helmet in, they put the gloves in, and it just arrived. And my dad didn't think anything of it, because back then they weren't thinking this stuff is archival and this is going to be so valuable. And so my dad set it up in our garage as kind of like a still life, and he painted in the garage, which was a bigger room than his studio at that house. And he did this painting that I'll have to show you at some point. You can see it online probably. Anyway, so that was me. My brother and I we'd grab the gloves, we'd put the gloves on, we'd put the helmet on. After a little while, they put the suit in the closet, and my mom would say that when people would come in the front door, my brother and I would be in the suit in the closet. Like an arm would just reach out of the closet. It would be us playing around in Gordon Cooper's suit. So that was kind of the cake. The next photo in this little montage is me and my father. This was Space Shuttle, I think in '83, STS-9. This was the first of 2 times that I joined the fine art program of NASA and documented one of the space shuttle missions down the Cape. My dad was also an artist for that, kind of introducing me, showing me the ropes. And that was the 2 of us with our sketch pads, and he was explaining, something, telling me how he would do it. And I still have those sketchbooks, and it's pretty cool because I look at his pen and ink drawings, and I look at my pen and ink drawings, and if we didn't sign them, they look similar because I learned from him. I learned how to sketch from him, so it's almost the same. My pencil was a little bit different than his. He did pen and ink, which is an unforgiving medium. Once you put that pen down on that paper, you can't erase it. So that leads me into the following group of slides. For the movie First Man, starring Ryan Gosling, about Neil Armstrong, I got this email from Universal Pictures, and it was pretty much like boilerplate, Damien Chazelle, the director of La La Land, is directing First Man, the story of Neil Armstrong, based on the book by James Hansen, and we understand that your father, was an artist with NASA back in the 1960s, and we'd like your permission to use your father's artwork in the movie. And then it continues to say, your father was a public figure. Basically, we don't really need your permission, but we like, the family's blessing. So I read that. I said to my wife, this is really cool. Of course, I'm going to give them permission. This is so cool. And then I don't know if I called Rick Armstrong, Neil's son, who I'm friends with, or whether he had called me on the same day. And I told him about this, and I said, hey, how cool is this? They're going to use my dad's artwork. And he said, yeah, that's really cool. And we talked for a few minutes, and then I sent this email off, and absolutely you could use blah, blah, blah. A day later, I get an email, I misquoted. The producers would like to hire an actor to play your father in the movie, and while he was a public figure, we don't need your permission, but we'd like the approval, blah, blah, blah. So I called Rick, and Rick said, yeah, I heard about that. A historian had told them that your father was part of this program, that he was in that suiting up room, and Damien Chazelle must have really gravitated to that, because he's he's a film director, but he's an artist at heart, and he understood what I said at the beginning of this discussion, that art has a place in all of this because it's documenting what all the workers have done to get man into space and rockets into space. And so Rick said, yeah, that's great. We talked for like 15 minutes, and then he joked, he said, you should play your father in the movie. And I was like, yeah, that'd be so cool. And so I get off the phone with Rick and I type up a letter to the guy, absolutely, you got our permission, blah, blah, blah. But if you want an actor to play Paul Calle, why not use someone who knows everything about Paul Calle, who's an artist like Paul Calle, who can draw like Paul Calle, and has the sketchbook and the pens that Paul Calle used in 1969, ... I can be in Atlanta anytime you need me. And about 10 minutes after I said it, I get a call back to the guy, if you're serious, I'll pass this up. And I said, of course I'm serious. And that's how it all came to be. And so I played my father in the movie First Man, sketching Ryan Gosling as Neil Armstrong during the breakfast. The few photographs up top are clips from the movie, and then the bottom is one of the sketches I did with the pens, and I used my dad's actual pens, and I used my dad's actual sketchbook that still had sketches from 1969 in it of the breakfast, and Damien and Ryan Gosling and everybody thought that was like really cool. They were like flipping through it. And the bottom is one of the sketches I did that morning, and everybody signed it. Damien Chazelle and Ryan Gosling and Corey Stahl, everybody signed it. And to this day, Rick Armstrong will be talking about something, and First Man will come up, and he'll just look at me and he'll say, you owe me. I know. Anyway.
Who's else in that room that's on your panel?
I'm getting to that.
Oh.
So, my father was in there sketching during the breakfast like I was, but then my father moved on to the suiting up room, where he was sketching the astronauts as they suited up. And my dad did many sketches of Neil Armstrong and Mike Collins and Buzz Aldrin, and in one of those, at least one of those sketches, he captured a very young Ronnie Woods, because Ron was Buzz Aldrin's suit technician, and in one of the sketches, Ron Woods is helping Buzz Aldrin suit up. So very, very, very cool. And Ron was a consultant on the movie, and I was saying last night how I walked in the room where they were doing the suiting up, and everybody was like, hey Ronnie, this microphone, was it this way, was that way? Hey Ronnie. He was like, everywhere somebody was asking Ron a technical question. It was a lot of fun. It was great to see you there. Yeah, it was a good time. We go to the next one. So this is another series I've been working on since the 50th anniversary of Apollo 7. There was an artist back in the 1960s by the name of Robert Rauschenberg. He was part of the NASA Fine Art program, not at the inception of it, but around 1969 during the Apollo 11 mission. And he combined, back then there was no Photoshop, there was no digital art. He would combine like lithography, where you had to print on a printing press, with drawing and painting, and he would like layer things kind of like Photoshop, but before Photoshop. And he would layer these things and make these lithographs, many of them very, very large, and then he would come back on it with drawing on it and put like a sponge with paint, and so he took imagery from NASA and then added his own kind of twist to it. And he's always been a real inspiration for me throughout my illustration career. I did a technique similar to this where, again, pre-Photoshop, I would like take Xerox copies and glue them down and paint on top of them and draw on top of them. And so now with the technology now, I've started putting these kind of historical pieces together, utilizing photographs, putting them together in Photoshop with layering and all these different imagery, and then I print it on canvas, and then I paint and draw on top of that to kind of add my own hand to it. And so the one on the left is an Apollo 9 piece. The one in the middle is Charlie Duke from Apollo 16, and then the one on the left, on the right, is Apollo 11. And you can see. If they put this up at the end, you can see in each one I include my father's logo on his stationery was his thumbprint, and so kind of a little Easter egg I put in each one of these is my dad's thumbprint. And on the I think on the Charlie Duke one or the other one, I sometimes include like one of those photographs of me with Gordon Coopers. spacesuit, so I include all these different things sort of hidden, some not hidden, and in the middle one of Charlie Duke, kind of in the middle to the left of JFK, is the photograph that Charlie Duke brought to the moon with him of his family, and he left, I think he brought two, left one on the moon, brought one back, and I was with Charlie Duke and Donnie Duke and a whole group of people in Houston for the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation had a Apollo 16 Gala, 50th anniversary, or 45th anniversary? No. 50th, yeah. And Charlie was there, and I asked him to sign the original, and he signed. I wanted him to sign it, but not like autograph. I wanted his signature to become part of the artwork. And that idea failed miserably because I gave him one of those gold pens, and he signed it going vertically up the left side, and it completely got lost, so you wouldn't even see it. So he's like, that didn't work. And I'm like, nah, that didn't work. And so I asked him to sign it somewhere else, and he signed it to the left of the family photo. And he said, what do you want me to say? And I said, I don't know, you love your family, you know. And so he signs it, I love my family, with an arrow, Charlie Duke. So that was kind of cool on that one. So that's a series I'm working on, continuing working on it. I'm trying to do 2 or 3 for each of the Apollo missions. I did 3 or 4 for Tom Stafford, General Stafford, for the Apollo 10 anniversary at his museum, and I'm doing them continuing. It's kind of ongoing. Mark, you want to do another slide? Great. So this is a piece.
Make a great T-shirt.
Yeah, makes a great T-shirt from the American Space Museum. Everyone should get one. It's a piece I did called Gemini 4 Spacewalk. It's Ed White during the Gemini 4 mission. And as I was starting to do this painting, I had this idea. Jim McDivitt, who I was friends with, the Apollo Gemini 4 and Apollo 9 astronaut, had given me these small 1 by 1 inch pieces of silver that he flew on the mission on Gemini 4. And I asked him, why'd you fly silver? You know, and he everybody flew the flags and all this stuff. And in his PPK, he flew this little bag with these pieces of silver. He says, I asked him, why did you fly these pieces of silver? You know, wasn't a piece of jewelry, it's just pieces of silver. He said, I don't know. I don't remember why. And somebody recently, the bag with the pieces of silver was sold, I think, out of our auction or Heritage Auctions. But he had given me a piece for my wife, a piece for each of my kids. And so before I started this painting, I had this idea, hey, why not, a la Alan Bean, why don't I add something flown onto the painting, while I'm doing it. And Alan Bean would cut up pieces of his bay cloth and from his patch, and he'd incorporate them in different parts of his paintings and some of that Kapton foil. And I had done that with one other piece, with some Kapton foil from Apollo 11. But I thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool if I scraped this down and added in the paint that I used to paint? At first, my idea was to paint Ed White's umbilical cord, their lifeline. So I shaved it into the paint, and I did that, and then I still had, you shave it down, and it's like nothing. And I had a lot more left, and so I incorporated into all the paint I did in Ed White's spacesuit in Ed White. So that was kind of cool. But before I did it, I called Alan Bean, and I said, hey, Alan, I'm working on this painting, and here's what I want to do. I don't want to steal your thunder, but I'm gonna, I'm shaving this down. Jim gave it to me, and he's like, oh, that's a great idea, and I'm not gonna live forever, and somebody's gotta, take on this, mantle, take on this role of doing that, and I think, that's great, you're gonna be the one, and so I've tried to incorporate a little foil, a little something that flew, in different paintings I'm doing. I'm working right now on a big 7-foot-long Earthrise painting, and I'm incorporating something that flew on every Apollo mission in this piece. So that's that. And so that was this painting. This goes back to, I think, the second slide where I was talking about those hand-drawn first-day covers. So the interesting thing about the Calle family of stamp designing is my father designed the first man on the moon stamp in 1969, which is that one. Yes. And then the Postal Service asked me to design the stamp to the right of it, the $2.40 priority mail stamp, which the interesting quick story to that is, my dad and I were sharing a studio at the time that I designed this, and I had designed a few stamps already for the Postal Service, but the art director, Jack Williams, called, and my dad answered the phone, and he's talking, and we were speculating that, hey, it's it was a year before the anniversary, and they've got to do an anniversary stamp, and the Postal Service back then at least was very mum about what they were going to do for the next year or the next 2 years. But Jack called, and I figured, it's got a stamp for one of us. My dad answers the phone, and they chatted for a little while, and then Jack said, as it happened a couple other times, "Hey, it's Chris there." And so my dad's like, "Okay, Chris is here." So he knew that it wasn't a design for him, but he didn't know what it was. And so Jack asked me if I, would be willing to design this stamp for the $2.40 priority mail stamp, which is a very large stamp. It was the largest stamp I think at the time. And I said, sure. And my dad, humorously, he said they should have given it to me. That should be my stamp design. So in a brilliant moment of continuity for the Postal Service, my dad designed the stamp in 1969. I designed the 20th anniversary, and we jointly designed those two stamps at the bottom, the 29-cent commemorative stamp and the $9.95 express mail stamp for the 25th anniversary. And we had this amazing idea for the 50th anniversary. And for 10 years prior, my father was still alive, the year before he passed away, we put together in Photoshop, we took his, I should have included it here, and I will the next time we do a talk. We had taken his original painting of the 1969 moon landing stamp, so it's not this engraved version of it. And we had changed the text to read "First Men on the Moon," 1969-2019, and that's such an iconic image. It's such an iconic postage stamp that even non-stamp collectors, non-space collectors probably recognize that, and anyone who was alive during that time probably has one of those stamps somewhere kicking around in a drawer somewhere, if not in an album. So we thought that would be brilliant. They would get incredible marketing. Here's the original painting by the guy who did the original stamp jointly with his son who did the 20. It was built-in marketing. So for 10 years, and we did maybe 4 or 5 different versions of it. I would pack up that little folder in an email and send it to the post office every year to the art director. Crickets, never heard anything. And finally, I would talk to someone who was in the committee that chooses, we haven't made decisions yet, but I kept sending it. And I personally think they missed a golden opportunity. The stamps that they designed, I think were nice. The one of Buzz Aldrin and one of the moon, but I think they could have gotten so much marketing and so much traction, and I think it would have attracted a lot more people to philately, because I think it had a built-in story. But there is the 75th anniversary and there is the 100th anniversary. I'll keep sending it to them. That's pretty much wraps up my my little me.
Nick had to leave. He's got kind of a medical sinus situation, he said. So we will hit next with Tim Gagnon, and when we go through the 4 here, I'll have you do your questions that you want to propose to everybody.
We do that after.
Yeah, right after it there. We can probably go past 4 o'clock for the to the Renaissance group here that we can't wait to hear. So next up is a great friend of the museum for over 20 years, Tim Gagnon. Of course, if you don't know, the shield that we're using, we call it the shield for this event, that we want to brand this event with, is Tim's creation there, and we're real proud of it. So you're going to see some of his other great work here.
Thank you. Now, anybody that has been to Titusville will recognize this view. I turned this into my logo. That's Apollo 17 launching in the distance on Pad A. You see Pad B has the lightning protection to the left. The full moon, of course, I'm a child of Apollo, and my first launch that I witnessed in person went to the moon, and I was a lot closer than this image would appear. I was standing next to the VAB, and the 2 stars in the sky are for my grandsons, and after our second grandson was born, my daughter said, "Dad, there will not be a constellation." And then the ISS is included because that's my gallery. Next slide. Now, when we came down for Apollo 17, and everybody that gets invited to a launch does the briefings, and you learn about the mission and all the associated information that they present. Well, I was first introduced to this patch at that briefing. And I was stunned. I mean, it kicks you right in the gut. That's the Apollo Belvedere statue in Rome. Bob McCall used that as a model for his painting, and they painted the patches back then. You'll see his signature is in just above the shoulder, to the right and above the shoulder. And I, 16 years old, all filled with myself, and I said, I can do that. Well, in the next slide, you'll see not quite as well yet. This was 72, so in 73, next slide. This article came out in Analog magazine, and I still have that magazine today because now I knew what I wanted to do, and this was the blueprints. Frank Kelly Freeze wrote a story about how he worked with Joe Kerwin for the first Skylab crew patch. So I had the desire, and now I had the information to get started. And next slide. These were the first two opportunities in the summer of 1973. I wrote to Tom Stafford, and I sent him this artwork. And he said, thank you very much for your interest, but I have to tell you that the Soviet commander is an accomplished artist with many showings. And of course, you know, I'm using crayon and magic marker, so it's not as impressive as it could have been. And then a few weeks later, they announced that a Skylab rescue mission was being worked on because during the second Skylab increment, the reaction control system developed a leak. And they had always had this eventuality in mind because they had the hardware in place. They could mount the mission in short order. The crew could stay safe aboard the workshop as long as it took. And I sent the drawing to Vance Brand in 1973. He wrote back that it looks like the mission won't be necessary, but thank you very much for your interest. And then in 2017, I met Vance Brand at Space Fest, and I said, sir, you have no reason to remember this. But 44 years ago, I sent you artwork for a Skylab rescue mission, and his wife spoke up and said, I know exactly where that is, and he had saved it for 44 years. And that September, he mailed it back to me with a nice note. And I hadn't seen it in 44 years. So, next slide.
That's a great story.
In 1985, the first real opportunity happened when Bob Crippen invited me to submit artwork for the STS-62A mission launching on Discovery from Vandenberg. And so, first line in the letter is, we have no way to pay you for this. So, rules had changed at NASA over the last 12 years, but I didn't care. If I had the opportunity, I would have paid them for this opportunity. So I sent these four designs to them, and if you notice, I've got the orbiter going in the wrong direction, because they're going to drop the solid rocket boosters on Western Canada. So they overlooked that part, I guess. And eventually, of course, after Challenger, the mission never got a chance to fly. Next slide. Now, shuttle missions, the first opportunity, I designed the Expedition 11 patch in 2004. The mission flew in 2005. And I received an email from became a close friend of mine, Dr. Jorge Carts of Madrid. He was an orthopedic surgeon. And he congratulated me on finally accomplishing my dream. And he said, I responded that if the opportunity ever arose again, we should collaborate. Well, we collaborated all those times, except for that last one. That was the end of program patch competition, and I was not able to compete in that competition because I had done other mission patches. I was able to compete because I worked for a company that sold specialty metal alloys to NASA for the shuttle program, and I was the shipping receiving manager. So I was essentially a contractor. My design took the bronze, and John Shannon presented me with the award. And I think, Mark, you have that around here somewhere, the award.
Yes,
That we can show people. And right after 2 months after I got laid off.
We'll get that right there.
Yeah, we'll get them, no problem. But all of these were amazing opportunities. All the different crews had their own way of imagining their mission patch. You can see 127 wanted something very simple. The 129 crew wanted as much as we could cram into a patch. And they had to get special permission to get that design approved because the patch is supposed to be 16 square inches, you know, a 4-inch circle. And that patch is about 5 3/4 inches high. And they got it approved. A lot of the responses from astronauts over the years were thank you for your interest, but our patch has been designed by Robert McCall. Well, Eric Bowe, who was our point of contact on 126, was the pilot for 133, and when they were announced, they were going to be the last shuttle crew. 134, 135 were not yet on the manifest. So they turned to Bob McCall to design that patch. Perfect bookends for the program. He did the STS-1 patch, he would do the final 133 patch. He did 2 beautiful watercolor paintings, sent them off to Houston on a Friday via FedEx, and on Saturday morning he passed away. He was 90 years old. The crew learned about his passing before they even received the package, and they said, now, you know, like, now what are we going to do? You know, in a crew meeting that weekend. And Eric said, you know, well, we've got a package waiting for us, and they got it on Monday. They opened it up, and I mean, Bob McCall, like Chris Calle's dad, their sketches were like, oh my God. And so Eric Bowe said, well, why don't we get Tim and Jorge to finish this? And it felt like I was being given the paintbrush of Michelangelo by the Pope. Finish the ceiling for him. And we were scared to death of this patch. Because I don't want to be the guy going down in history as the one that messed up Bob McCall's last artwork. And thankfully, you know, and the other nice thing for me was that in those 2 sketches that McCall did, he misspelled an astronaut's name. I do that all the time. So to have something in common with Bob McCall, I'm good with it.
So the torch was passed.
That's right. Next slide, please. Now, 129 rules were definitely made to be broken. They had actually 2 official patches for this mission. The one on the right is for print media, like stickers and postal covers and things like that. The one on the left, you cannot embroider gradients. You have to have things that can be stitched on the sewing machine. So we had the 2 different suns. They specifically requested no clouds be over the KSC because they didn't want a weather delay. And they said, while you're at it, make sure Houston's clear too.
Yeah.
And right before we were finished, they said, add 1 more star to the patch. And it's right above Butch Wilmore's name. And so we knew that the stars on this patch were for the kids of the astronauts. So we knew somebody was about to have an amazing time. Well, the day Randy Resnick took his first spacewalk on STS-129, his daughter was born. Next slide. Now, this is, and you guys, if you have a QR code reader on your phone, you can scan this. The shuttle program continues to inspire to this day. I decided last year to create a series of patches that celebrates the orbiters in their new mission of education and inspiring the public with a set of exhibit patches. Now, Enterprise is in New York City on the Intrepid. It was used for fit checks at KSE and Vandenberg, so that's why you show the 2 stacks. You got the approach and landing tests off the 747, and then when I designed this, I had it landing on the deck of the carrier, but I used the original logo colors of the Intrepid Museum for that carrier deck. Well, not a week before these patches went into production, the Intrepid decides to change its logo And so now that's a historical relic, it's not current. We really needed to be extremely careful with Columbia and Challenger, because both of those orbiters were lost, but they have such a rich legacy that I depict Columbia heading east towards landing, and Challenger has made it safely into orbit with symbols from their most iconic missions. Discovery, of course, is in Washington, D.C., and so, in the Udvar-Hazy Center, it's got the American flag hanging above and behind it, so I just enlarged that. On each side of the flag are the two return-to-flight missions, because they were flown on Discovery. We talked earlier at a panel about the Ulysses mission that was launched on Discovery to the sun. So at the top of the patch is a sun representing not only that Ulysses mission, but the sun is also the logo for the Smithsonian. So that worked out very well. At the bottom is the United States Capitol, and above the Capitol on each side is ghost stitched the name of Jake Garn and John Glenn, because they were both US senators when they flew on the shuttle. They both flew on Discovery, and so it also illustrates that this orbiter is in the nation's capital. Atlantis, that's the one I'm wearing here. This is our baby. This is the one that's home here in Florida. I depicted it at its correct angle for exhibit, with the Earth behind it, just like the screen shows when you go to the Space Center. It's got the orbiter, the remote arm, at that proper angle displayed like in the museum. You got the Hubble, you got the station, you got Mir, because Atlantis was the first orbiter to dock with Mir. And then you have both Venus and Jupiter for its missions to those places. Then Endeavour, it had to be Hollywood. I had to have the ubiquitous searchlights in the sky above the Hollywood sign. You've got below that the new museum that's being built. Across from that is the LAX airport, and the orbiter in the sky is illustrating various missions that Endeavour flew. The stars, you noticed all the stars were in the border on the other patches. Well, the California State Seal has the word Eureka above it and stars above the word Eureka. So I did the mission stars for Endeavour the same way the State Seal of California is exhibited. And next slide. Now, Mark alluded to this emblem here. The shield was a tribute to the entire shuttle program, but specifically because the American Space Museum honors the people that worked behind the scenes and out of the headlights. This patch needed to honor them. The stars trailing the orbiter around the center there pay tribute to the 18 shuttle workers that died in the line of duty. Of course, it's a red, white, and blue patch. The launch is prominently displayed because that's what we do here. And then the two major payloads and programs were Hubble and the servicing missions and the ISS and with assembly. The orbiter names are listed as they would appear on the spaceflight awareness flags. And there are 7 sets of twin stars, and they honor the crews of both Challenger and Columbia. And this year, the museum had medallions made up, and they turned out beautifully. I can't believe how well they are for as small as they are. And in the future, there could be t-shirts, there could be patches, but you know, support the museum as best you can, because it's the perfect little gem in Brevard County that still doesn't get as much publicity as it richly deserves. Next. I think that's the last one? Okay.
Yeah.
Tim, thank you, folks.
Yeah, and I got yours too. We're gonna run a little bit over, and I apologize to the last presenters there, but we got a great crowd here, and we're all interested in hearing what our Rocket Renaissance panel has too, as we continue with these wonderful artists here. Go ahead, Ron Wood.
Ron
So
Wood.
I got, yeah.
Well, I guess the reason I paint is because I'm trying to catch up with Chris. And probably never happened, and the closest thing I ever got to a stamp was at the post office last week. Anyway, I was in the suit room there with his father. I didn't know who he was at the time. And was honored that in that movie First Man, that Chris was there, had his father's sketchbook and shared a lot of that knowledge with me. But all the times we've been at Space Fest and everything, we had a really good time in talking about art, and I just try to bring a lot of detail to the hardware I worked on. Because I always look back at like ILC Industries up in Delaware, just an amazing place to go visit. And all the ladies in there that were doing the sewing and putting those suits together, you just go like, wow, how does this all happen? Like magic. But talk about professionals, and they sure were. Yeah, this one here, the first one there, like I said, fascinated with the hardware that, and some of the documentation that we had at Houston there with the 9/11 tags and everything. If you understood back on what we had to do to get a suit out the door, it was amazing, all the documentation, because each part had a parts tag like you see here. It all had to be filled out by hand. We had no computers or anything to take care of it. So to get a suit out the door, it was a couple of days effort to do that. A gentleman up in Indiana, the second slide there, asked me to do a Mercury, Mercury project for him, and to do all the different things that was related to those astronauts. So he was in town last week. I'm sorry to say I'm still working on the last two, and that's been 14 years.
Wow.
But I had other stuff to do. And then the next one, please. When I moved back to Houston after the Apollo program, we still had to come back to Kennedy to do Apollo Soyuz. So we shut the lab down, went back to Houston, and we had all these suits hanging in a row in our Class 3 area. And so I called that hanging around after a walk on the moon. I took the picture, but once again, I was slow Ron. It took me 20 years before I painted that. And then we go to the lunar boots, which are fascinating to me. You know, actually having to do repair on the RTV and all the things that we had to do to those suits to keep them either for training or get ready for flight. And so anyway, I did this project here and was trying to define in watercolor some of the lunar dust lightly being kicked up, and hopefully accomplish that.
It does, definitely.
And then we go into the next one there is the launch entry suits. And it was fascinating to see, once again, all these suits hanging in a row, all ready to fly in the same suit room that we had in Apollo. Only thing we did, we defined new consoles to use for each suit. And then I had a chance to do a plum crater for a gentleman over in Mississippi. And anyway, that's the result of it there with Charlie Duke, and showed the picture to him, and he seemed to like it well enough to sign off on some of them. One of the, and then here, I went back to Houston after they closed down Shuttle, and I kind of got the job of logistics, identifying a lot of hardware that we had in different labs, and putting them in a showcase. And that was very interesting. And I found all these name tag or stamps for name tags that we would make new name tags for them after the ones wore out. So I always remember those words of Gene Cernan, you know, remember when. It seemed like every year around Christmas, he would, Claire Johnson, his secretary, office administrator, would call and say, hey, Ron, you got any small pieces that you could get to us real quick? Well, I called the printer in Georgia, and he says, it's tight squeeze here, but yeah, I'll have them to you by tomorrow afternoon. So I got them, signed them off, and sent them to Gene's office in Houston, and he would hand them out to all the people that worked at his ranch or took care of his aircraft. And then the next one there is pictures that I took over the years in the suit room. And I always like to work with that reflection, kind of capture all the hardware as it was sitting there for training purposes. And of course the tag on it, water emergency facilities, a class 3 training type equipment. And one time at lunch, I would go over there in Houston, I would go and watch Bob McCall paint, what was that, building 2, I guess it was, a huge mural.
Oh,
He
the
had this-
Teague Auditorium.
He had
yeah.
this scaffolding up there and everything. I'm going like, wow, look at this, man, that guy's really got it together. So a few years later, Joe comes to me, Joe Schmidt, and says, hey Ron, you want to get an A7LV suit? And you go over and get dressed up. Bob McCall's going to be over there, and he wants to do some photo work for his Smithsonian, what do you call it, the Cosmic View?
At the Air and Space Museum.
Yeah, so as it was, I had an opportunity to go to Gene Cernan's office in Houston to drop off some prints. Well, he's showing me the preliminary for this. He said, yeah, you had to take the NASA, or my crew patch off of it. It had to be a generic astronaut. I said, well, that's unfortunate. He said, well, you know, that's me though. And I said, sir, that's me too. I posed for that picture. And he says, Claire, get that man a picture of this and let me sign it off. And he's eating a sandwich and signing off. And,
So Ron, let me just jump in. So Gene Cernan was wrong twice. I painted Buzz Aldrin in my suit,
Yeah.
and it was you in his suit.
Right, exactly. But anyway, it's been a lot of fun over the years painting this, and one of them that I've kind of dear and dear to, I don't know if I should even say this or not, but I painted one called My First Lunar Boots.
Yeah.
And the reason it became My First Lunar Boots, I go to New Hampshire every year, and we're looking through
I almost chose that one there.
one of the cemeteries to see if there was some, you know, some of my wife's relatives or something that we'd missed over the years. And so we came across this headstone. It was just amazing, all the toys around it and everything else. Well, anyway, this young man passed away, but I finally located his mom up there in New Hampshire at a thrift store that we normally went to just probably almost every day. And I just saw her wrist, and she had a green bracelet on and said, Trey Strong. And I said, do you know that young man? She said, that was my son. If anybody wants to read this, I'll leave it up here. I just get it back, but I can't do
Hey,
it.
Mark,
Yeah.
maybe you can read this for the record.
Okay, yeah.
But this kid, before he passed away, he wrote this. I'm going like, wow, that's amazing that he took the time to do this. Very smart young man. Don't want to
Be
need it.
glad to hear. It says, I will go to the moon in a rocket. It will take me a few hours to get to the moon. I will wear a suit with a helmet that has air in it. I need air in my suit because there's no air on the moon at all. It is freezing on the moon. I saw Neil Armstrong's first flag on the moon. There are Neil Armstrong's footprints on the moon. I'm going to see if my foot is as big as Neil Armstrong's by sticking my foot in his footprint. Since there is no gravity on the moon, I will dance on the moon and fly around. Woohoo! I am going to bring back rocks home to show my family. After collecting rocks, I will go back to planet Earth and celebrate that I went to the moon. Trey Colby Strong there. In July 26th he was born, and he passed away December 18th.
Didn't mean to end this
10
on a
years
sad-
old, Thornton, New Hampshire.
Didn't mean to be this on a sad note, but I'm just saying that, no matter where you go, there's a space enthusiast somewhere, no matter how old, how young. Just like I'd go to Joe Schmidt's house. He's 101, still living by himself. His family would go check on him. I'd go see him, and every time I walked in, he'd go, "Boy, we worked some good missions together, didn't we, Ronnie?"
That's for sure.
Joe Schmidt. Thank you, Ron. Ron's got his artwork in the room next door here. Quite unique stuff there, and Chris, of course, is selling stuff here. Tim, you can hook up with him, he'll hook you up with patches. Our final photographer, it's an art panel. Yes, photography is art. And one of my new best friends, Tom Usciak here, has got some of his best work here. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. Well, I started my career as a college newspaper photographer in 1971 for Apollo 15. And I had black and white film. I had to go shoot it. I had to bring it home. I had to process it and get it right out to the newspaper because it was a news photograph and the deadline was the day after I came home. So I was talking to some people and they said, I want to do the next one, but I want to do it a little differently. And so they looked at the photographs. They said, a news photo tells so much more of a story, because I was learning about news photography then. I didn't really know that much about it. And they said, get people in the picture. When you do, the next time you do something, do that and get people in the picture. It creates more interest. So that's what I did with this shot of Apollo 16, taken from the press site, 3.5 miles away. The thing that always amazed me the most about that is it's almost clear the tower, and we still haven't heard it yet. It's just quiet. And then it comes on you. But, and then now it's not a news photo anymore or anything like that. So those negatives were put to rest for maybe 35, 45 years. And then this re-emergence of the space program got interesting again, and digital's coming along, and books are coming out, and magazines. They're trying to really reignite the space program. So we went in and pulled out some of our old negatives, and they were in pretty bad shape. Not physically, but over time, color film would fade. This is all pre-digital. All no Photoshop, and pre-Photoshop too at the time of putting them away. And I said, well, I'd like to do something with these. And there was dirt and scratches on the film and that too. And my brother, who for a living is a digital artist, he works in an industry that deals with this on a daily basis. So we started going and scanning a lot of our old film and cleaning it up. And since that, this photograph, or photographs in the sequence, have been used on a calendar. The sequence here, the liftoff, the wider view, a lower version of it was used in J.L. Pickering and John Bisney's book on moonshots, snapshots and moonshots. And then about 2 years ago, I got contacted from National Geographic. They'd seen it somehow, and that's one of the good things about social media and photo and Facebook and everything. Your work, all of a sudden, you put it here, and then the next day it's around the world, conceivably. And I got a call from National Geo, and they were doing this book on Apollo artifacts around the 50th anniversary. And this picture caught their attention and had nothing to do with the rocket, nothing to do with the blue sky, the bright orange flame there, all they were concerned about was the fact that RCA was handing out at the press site to reporters these paper sun visors that folded in the back and, kept the sun out of your eyes. And it so happens that they took a photograph of one of them. Someone had one, and they took a full-page photograph of it. And then they found this picture that there's two people right there wearing them. So that is how my photo, which was actually this photo, was in the National Geographic book, got in there. And it's just so it's funny how things go forward. Now this one, actually the flip-flop, this one was Apollo 16 the night before at sunset. And again, this was also used after about 40-plus year hiatus. So again, was used in JL and John's book as in the title page. And I can remember being out there, and when I was out there, we were shooting this sequence, and the sun, was still up above, probably right around there where the device or whatever it is going up the pad ramp was yet. So the sun was between there and one of the searchlight or street lights up there, and I was hoping, but the lights were not on the rocket yet. It was just nothing but a silhouette because the sun was shining there and there was no lights on it, and just a silhouette. And I was saying, please, come on, turn those lights on, turn those lights on. And the sun went down and nothing happened. And that was that. But now, my feeling is with a news photograph or trying to tell a news story, there's no place for Photoshop. No. You see it today, it's all over the place today. I mean, and look what happened, the big deal that was made with pictures of the royal family over there. I mean, that was all over that was like the lead story on the nightly news one night. But after a period of time, I thought, well, I'm not using this. A news photograph is really valuable for 24 hours, 2 days maybe, and then it becomes, if you don't save your newspapers, it becomes whatever you do with it. And what we did was, I always wanted to know what that would be like with that sun up and that lighting on the rocket. So I went to my brother and I said, what can you do for me? And he created this picture with the sun still above the pad ramp and the rocket lit like that. And I don't call it a photograph, I call it a photo illustration, which is what anything you alter in Photoshop really becomes. And it's hanging up on the 5th floor here of the hotel in the launch viewing room. It's over on to the left on the wall. And the sun is up and the rocket is lit like that instead of just being a dark, flat silhouette. But it's also it's a piece of art now, not a news photograph anymore. Next slide. One of the magazines I worked for in the late 70s, just pre-shuttle, was a magazine called Aviation Space. It was published out of Washington, D.C. Now, a lot of people mistake it for Aviation Week and Space Technology. That's not what it was. It was a magazine that was published by the American Society of Aerospace Education. It was like a space information magazine, something similar to what Ad Astra is now, or what Final Frontier used to be. That was another magazine. But you look around, magazines, there are not too many of them left with the digital age. But this is a shot, and I was serving as photo editor of that magazine at that time. And when I went to cover this, I envisioned this shot. I said, this is the shot that I want, even before I went to Florida to attempt to do it. Now, I was using a Hasselblad motorized camera because I wanted a very good, sharp resolution, large format or medium format negative, and so I had to give up the speed of the camera for the sharpness and extra quality of the negative. So another airplane came in before this, a larger airplane, not as big as a 747 there, but it came in, and so I practiced with that camera, because these cameras today shoot 8 to 10 frames a second. The Hasselblad shot maybe 2.5 frames a second. So I had to be right on that. And so when it was coming, I picked it up way out, and I wasn't shooting, I was just following it on the pan. As soon as I saw the smoke, the wheels touched down, I clicked the shutter and just kept moving, kept panning with it. And I got that shot, and I got the T-38 there, Pete Slayton was flying, and the 747 coming, or the orbiter coming in to get its tile job finished, and that's the only time that I can ever remember I got exactly the shot that I wanted before I went to try and create it. Next slide. I always said, as a news photographer, altitude, height is your best friend. No matter if you're shooting something like that, which is taken from the roof of the VAB, which is 500 feet up, or whether you're lucky enough to stand up at a podium when someone's giving a speech and you can look over heads instead of get your pictures back with someone's this or an ear or something like that in. And I just wanted to, that was a man camera shot right there, and I just wanted to hopefully get it the way that it looked to my eye. And I had, as Mark mentioned before, I had a business. I owned and operated a professional photo lab for 30 plus years. And I had control over all the film, all the work, all the output. It's not like I sent my film off and I said, well, now here's what I like it and how I'd like it to look, and then I'd do this until it came back. Now, I was with the film from the time I took it out of the wrapper until that print was coming out of the processor, or however, whatever format I was making work with that negative. But
what lens?
What lens?
Oh, that is a 500 millimeter Hasselblad lens.
Wow. All right, that's a biggie.
No cheap.
And here's another advantage where altitude and height is everything. This is also from the roof of the VAB. And that is Challenger coming home on mission 41G. Bob Crippen finally got his Cape landing. And I got cheated out of 2 of them. I was covering STS-7, which was supposed to make the first Cape landing.
Yep.
And it ended up, I looked up, the day before, the weather was perfect. It was crime of the century. And the next morning, these clouds, and it's getting worse and worse. And I remember Eddie Harrison, who was the NASA PAO in charge of the photographers, took real good care of the photographers over the years, got on the PA and said, well, they're taking it to Edwards. So that's the famous line, what they say to Crippen, good news, bad news, the beer is cold, but unfortunately it's 3,000 miles away. And then it happened again on 41C, which was another Crippen flight, and the same scenario. I was down there waiting for it to come in to KSC, and the weather actually was worse that day than it was for the 7 attempt. So finally, on 41G, he got it right. This is from the roof of the VAB. You can see the boaters out there. They were getting a great look at it. This is right before final. Well, it's in its final flare right there, just before they lowered the landing gear, and that is a 800 millimeter lens that's 35 millimeter. The Hasselblad would not have worked out there. It was too fast. The Hasselblad's not a spot news or a news camera. The Hasselblad is a portrait, commercial, shots on the moon camera, but it doesn't have a fast motor. Next. Here's another one where Perseverance came in. This was a difficult shot to get. This is a remote camera. We obviously you can see where we're at there, we would not be able to be that close to the launch pad, but we tried this shot maybe 6 or 7 times to try and get it like this, but everything was contingent. When you're trying to set up a camera at an angle like this, it's all how the way the wind blows, as they would say. And a lot of times you just get it over and you don't see the rocket. Because first of all, again, it's with the Hasselblad, and the Hasselblad is slow. But after so many attempts, we got it, and then I never tried it again. Now, every shot that I've shown here today was on film, all pre-digital. I'd say 95% of the work that I've done here since 1971 was with film. And the biggest advantage I had with that was having complete and total control over it, which a lot of photographers didn't have. And you know, they put it in send it off in the mail, wedding photographers, commercial photographers, whatever, you know, when they were dealing with film. Now today, you know, with the computers and the technology, the photographer has much more control over. You don't have to be careful with how many shots you're shooting. I mean, with the Hasselblad, if I either had a maximum of 24 exposures, sometimes only 12 if I was using 120 film or 220 film. With 35 millimeter, you had 36 exposures. I could squeeze off 36 exposures in my camera here right now in about 3 seconds. Yeah, probably 10 frames a second maximum. So, I mean, and there's no cost anymore to film costs. And you shoot away. We call it, a lot of guys today that we have a little joking term for it. You know, it's called spray and pray. You know, you're looking for a shot, you go like that, and hey, there's one that works. And there you have it. How many did you take? Oh, well, there's 72 there, but it didn't take long to get them. And that's my story.
Thank you, all 4 of you there. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
No, I know you've got other panels. The only thing to add is anybody has any, we were going to take questions, but I think we should move on. But anybody has any questions, you know, we'll be available, you know, for the rest of the
We're
year.
all around here for sure. That's right, we're going to do our Renaissance Space panel to end with Josh Dujan of Hyatt Space is coming up here, Kevin Brown of All Points, and Bert Dick of the National Space Society. And so we're going to set that up for there, but if you got a few questions while I'm doing that, and we're going to do the drawing, because I said we'd do it at 4 o'clock. And go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question. That picture of the 747 with the shuttle on it?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought all the 747s had the tail split in half for the aerodynamics past the shuttles. In that picture, it's just...
You mean those fins like those?
No, in the aft.
Yeah.
The tail assembly.
Oh, the tail cone? Like on
No, on the 747.
Well, that was 78, so it might have been before they did that.
They didn't?
Well, they were there. I don't think you could, just the angle of the shot is hiding them, it looks like. I think I know what you mean.
Yeah. The FCA always had the outward.
Yeah, they would be sticking out a little further there. You're talking about the ones off the elevators in the back.
It's just not reviewed.
All right.
Daniel,
We'll look back.
take a picture of the 4 of us real quick.
Because they've been there since the beginning. Even with the AOT.
Yeah.